Hi, everybody. It's Ian Bremmer here. And indeed, I'm back in New York. And last night, yet another presidential debate, GOP debate, the fourth. Been asked all day long what I thought about it. And the answer is increasingly not so much. The ratings are going down. There's only so much new that these candidates are prepared to tell us. It's a lot of canned talking points. They've been prepped for these 30-second and 1 minute sound bites, most of them within an inch of their lives. Even Ben Carson increasingly sounds coherent. He's a smart guy, and whether or not he has experience actually doing anything related to public policy doesn't mean that he won't pick this up after 5 or 6 or 7 times giving it a shot. Clearly, the Fox Business folks were gun shy about providing too much entertainment after CNBC got eaten up for allowing the candidates to really making it just a bun fight, just hitting at each other. As a consequence, the questions were a lot more substantive, but really very little that was new. A couple of things that I think are interesting, though. One that's important is that we are seeing a growing divide in foreign policy among the candidates. And we're seeing it within the Democratic side, less interesting because Hillary, of course, is pretty much getting the nomination. But on the Republican side, you really saw a growing trope of isolationism among many who recognize that a lot of Americans don't want to have the international engagement anymore. I thought it was fascinating to see Trump come out and say that it is great for Putin to be attacking ISIS. Let him do it. And yes, certainly the Russians aren't aligned with the United States completely or even very much right now in Syria. But the fact is there are very few Americans that actually want to commit significant numbers of troops on the ground. Very few people. There we go. Don't know why. So the Russians, if they're willing to send people into battle and take the consequences, including the ISIS bomb we've recently seen, then we have a lot of Americans, I would dare say a plurality at least, that think the best strategy is for the Americans to lay back and let the Russians do that. Trump is playing into that. Rand Paul is playing into that. On the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders is playing into that. And what's interesting is it's not as if it's a great policy, but that the alternatives aren't getting an awful lot of traction because they don't have a lot of substance behind them. And I think that's interesting. You know, Marco Rubio, who I generally find quite coherent on foreign policy, but saying we're weak and we need to spend much more on defense. Well, the United States right now spends as much as the next 9 countries combined on defense. Now, no one in the Republican debate yesterday had that fact to hand. And so as a consequence, no one pushed him on it. But nonetheless, it's hard to make the argument that the United States needs to be spending more on defense right now when you don't have very credible policies around what exactly you want to be doing with that. So I find that, you know, on the one hand, Marco Rubio is certainly the most attractive of the mainstream Republican candidates right now. I thought that Jeb Bush wasn't beaten up as badly in this last debate as he has previously, but you still have, you know, sort of 8 serious candidates more or less on the stage, a few in the undercard as well. There's just not a lot of air for Jeb Bush. If he isn't, you know, putting in an A-plus performance, he certainly didn't do that yesterday. Carly Fiorina was fine, I thought, but again, didn't land any strong punches. I thought Ted Cruz was probably the most effective of the debaters. I've been waiting for Ted Cruz to come out precisely because he is so incredibly smart and good on the on the dais. He knows how to debate. There's no question from his background, and certainly he's shown that in Congress. But I would say that. You know, one of the biggest mistakes made yesterday was also by Ted Cruz when he had his Rick Perry moment. Asked, you know, sort of what again were those 5 departments that he wanted to close, and it was IRS, HUD, Department of Energy, and then he said Department of Commerce twice because, you know, commerce is so bad. I guess you want to label it again. Yeah, 5 is harder than 3. Rick Perry only had 3 he had to remember, but nonetheless, that wasn't memorable. Other things that amused me, the fact that Donald Trump seemed to believe that China was actually a part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a reason he opposed it. It's not, Donald, though long term they probably will end up joining or at least aligning himself with it. Another point was that Ben Carson said that the Chinese are in Syria. implying that they were engaging militarily there. That's clearly not true, and the Chinese have no such interest. Carson's team actually doubled down on that today, but nobody cares. It's not as if we're expecting much from Carson on foreign policy. It's not as if you expect much from me to separate conjoined twins anytime soon. Look, I mean, I still think that the problem here is that we have a presidential debate that is going to, election, it's going to cost us between $5 and $10 billion. It lasts almost 2 years. It is, I mean, the number of debates, the amount of airtime being devoted to this is exhausting to most. It's bewildering to those outside the United States. The campaign reform is not coming. And I still think we're very far from actually knowing what the Republican candidate is going to look like. The fact that Trump is still out in front and that Carson is real close at this stage in the race, it means almost nothing to me. Unless that's the case as we get closer to January and real money starts to be spent to actually attack these individuals, I still think most serious Republican money at this point believes they're still going to implode, and that's why they haven't actually spent on serious attack ads. We'll see where it goes, but that's where I'd be betting right now. So, frankly, I suspect that the news cycle on this fourth Republican debate is already close to coming to a close. In another couple of days, we will have forgotten. Therefore, great performances, lousy performances matter a little bit less now than they did before. It's much more about how you're doing day to day in the mainstream media, how you're doing in terms of your endorsements, and what are you doing on the ground in some of those early states. I'm going to have some news from you on all of that in terms of myself and New Hampshire relatively soon. A surprise for now, but you'll hear it from me in coming weeks. I'll leave it with that and wish all of you a pleasant evening. Bye.